Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar this evening. My name is Brandon Prelude. I am the Virginia Program Director for Solar United Neighbors, and I will be leading us through this webinar on this evening. And so tonight we're going to be doing a couple of things. First, we're going to be celebrating the defense of the net metering docket case for Appalachian Power Company, better known as APCO. And then we're going to pivot from there into talking about Dominion's current proposal bid for the SEC. And we'll outline what the proposal is. We'll talk about our thinking and some of our positions on it, what we're doing to fight against that, and how you, those of you who have joined on this evening and others, can join in this fight to protect fair value of net metering in Dominion territory. So I'm joined on this evening by a few people. Leah, could you move to the next slide? We're joined by Leah Farrell, who is a solar navigator for the Atlantic Southeast region. She's going to be navigating our slide deck for us. So a little bit of housekeeping. Come on in, join the webinar. You can choose your audio. There is a Q&A that will be happening at the end of our discussion. We preserved about 15 to 20 minutes for that. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there is a Q&A option. We ask that you please submit your questions into the Q&A. We'll be monitoring that as we go throughout the webinar, and then we will those questions that we aren't able to get to throughout the webinar, we'll answer during the Q&A session. This webinar is being recorded. We will share a link to everyone who has RSVP'd following this webinar in a follow-up email. That should happen in the next day, in the next day or so. So please be on the lookout for that. If you have someone who registered but they could not join us this evening, they will get a recording of this webinar so that they can go back and view it. Next slide, Amelia. And so I just want to introduce some of the folks that are on this panel on this evening. I've introduced myself. We're also joined by Ashish Kapoor, who is the Senior Energy and Climate Advisor for Piedmont Environmental Council. And then we're also joined by Ceylon Goodson Bell, who is the Atlantic Southeast Policy and Advocacy Campaigner for Solar United Neighbors. And so they both will be speaking at different times during this webinar presentation. Next slide for us, Leah. So I'm going to turn it over to Selah. He's going to talk a little bit about our regional policy perspective, and then we'll move forward.
Thanks, Brendan. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. Again, my name is Selah, pronouns he, him. I want to talk a little bit of background about who we are as an organization and where we operate in the Atlantic Southeast region. So we see ourselves as a community of people who are building a new energy system with rooftop solar at the cornerstone. We envision a clean, affordable, and equitable energy system that directs control, power, and benefits back to local communities, with solar on every roof and money in every pocket. Our mantra is that we help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And we're dedicated to representing solar owners and clean energy supporters and mobilizing them to produce profound changes in the American energy system. We're building and strengthening the constituency for clean energy across demographic, racial, and political lines. And we believe that if people benefit from clean energy and have clean energy, they will support local, state, and national policy that ultimately expands access to clean energy for everybody. And as you see on this map, it shows some of the places we work in the Atlantic Southeast, specifically Virginia, DC, and Maryland, and also Florida and Puerto Rico. And to give you a sense of the type of work that we're doing, it's kind of a long laundry list. I will not cover it all, but we fight for more equitable solar and storage policies. We help interested homeowners save money when they're accessing solar. We also protect the one-to-one retail value of NEM, like we're discussing today. And we push for programs like distributed power plants that help maximize the value of solar, storage, thermostats, and other customer-sided resources, all while still protecting community solar in places like Virginia and in other jurisdictions, and streamlining the permitting process for distributed solar so that it's much easier for people, again, to access this crucial technology. Can you go to the next slide, please, Leah? All right, so I'll pass it on to Brandon to give a little bit more of an overview of how net metering works.
Great. Thank you, Selah. And so just a brief overview, very, very bare bones here. Talk a little bit about what net metering is. So net metering is the policy that allows people with solar to get credit on their energy bills for energy that they produce and excess energy they produce. Virginia Code 56-594 establishes the rules for net metering here in the Commonwealth. To the picture to the right of this, you see what is a mock-up of what that looks like, where you have a home with solar that absorbs energy from the sun. It's then converted through its inverter from DC to AC. And then a bidirectional that energy then at step 3 is used in your current home, school, or office. And then the net metering comes into play at step 4 and 5. There's a bidirectional meter that's placed on the home that allows you to both send and receive energy, to both receive energy from the grid, but send energy back to the grid. Any excess energy that you do not use in your current energy load is then sent back to the grid, and it as a credit for you to then draw back from. It is a one-to-one retail value credit currently in the state of Virginia. And so right now in Dominion territory, I believe that is 14 cents is the retail rate. So you'll get a one-to-one credit for that. So if you consume 300 kilowatt hours of energy and produce 300 kilowatt hours of energy, you would owe zero at the current moment. This makeup of how net metering works does result in seasonal or daily surpluses. So let's say that you went on vacation for 2 weeks. You're not going to be running as many loads in your home, but your solar is still going to be producing energy for you. So you may end up with a greater amount of excess energy that is sent to the grid for you to then draw back on in your next billing cycle. In your next monthly cycle. It is key to understand that the billing for net metering happens in an annual billing cycle over a 12-month period based off of when your system was interconnected or when it received its permission to operate. Let's move on to the next slide, Leah. And I am going to toss it back to Selah to kind of talk a little bit about APCO's attempt to weaken net metering and what came out of that case.
Thanks for that breakdown, Brandon. So, as some of you probably already know, the Virginia Clean Economy Act passed in 2020, and it required state investor-owned utilities like APCO and Dominion to update their net metering program. And it also raised the net metering cap from 1% to 6% of each of these utilities' customer bases. So, APCO filed its proposal last summer in August, and the SEC made its ruling this summer at the end of August. And APCO, despite having a penetration rate of less than 1%, tried to significantly weaken their net metering program by reducing the compensation rate by almost 70% and dramatically narrowing that period in which customers can get credit for producing an excess amount of energy that goes back to the grid, like Brandon just broke down. They also tried to institute a new monthly fixed interconnection fee for their solar customers. So Sun intervened in that docket with Sierra Club, Vote Solar, and Clean Virginia. And we also had expert testimony that unveiled the many flaws in APCO's proposal. The SEC's staff testimony also closely aligned with many of our arguments, and we were able to get over 100 public comments in the docket, emphasizing the many values of solar that APCO was either disregarding or misrepresenting. Ultimately, the SEC rejected APCO's proposal, preserving the one-to-one retail credit for net metering and determining that 12-month netting is essential to an effective net metering program. And in doing so, they also quoted the statutory language that created the net metering program in the first place. And so again, this is a huge victory for folks in the APCO territory and is giving us a lot of cautious optimism about how the SEC may rule when it comes to Dominion. Leah, can we go to the next slide, please? So speaking of Dominion, they filed their proposal this summer, and they are by far Virginia's largest investor-owned utility with over or about 3.6 million customers compared to APCO's 530,000. So we know that this is going to be a much bigger fight. And although they have many more net metered solar customers than APCO, their solar penetration rate is still less than 3%, according to their latest testimony, although we know there's been a huge surge in installations ever since the federal tax credits were rolled back so that people can get those in before the official expiration at the end of the year. So we wouldn't be surprised if that penetration rate is closer to 4%. Again, After this, Brandon's going to talk a little bit more about how Dominion is dismantling its program, but I wanted to give a little bit more context about why they're actually trying to do so. So, as many of you know, Virginia is facing an energy demand crisis, primarily due to the unbridled surge in power-hungry data centers. A recent report by Virginia's Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission found that data centers could almost double the state's energy use in the next decade and cause Dominion's residential bills to increase by over $400 a year by 2040. And throughout the South, we're seeing utilities scramble to delay coal plant retirements and fast track the build out of gas power plants to serve data center demand. But in doing so, they're deliberately underestimating the role that rooftop solar, behind the meter storage, and other distributed energy resources can play in meeting energy demand in a way that decarbonizes the power sector, spurs local economic development, while still keeping the grid affordable, resilient, and reliable. Net metering helps increase the adoption of some of these critical resources, particularly solar. So you would think that Dominion would support a program like this, but instead, as Brandon will outline, they're following APCO's footsteps and trying to kneecap the program. Dominion and many other similarly structured investor-owned utilities attack common sense energy solutions like net metering because they care more about prioritizing the profits of their wealthy shareholders than providing reliable electricity to their customers at fair and reasonable rates. One of the ways that Dominion makes money for their shareholders is by investing significant amounts of capital into large generation and transmission infrastructure, like gas power plants or transmission lines. They're able to recoup their investments from their customers and also get a guaranteed rate of return when they spend that money on this infrastructure. And so NIM systems help lower the need to actually build out a lot of this infrastructure that ultimately is utility owned and very centralized. And since that is, again, one of the greatest sources of profits for Dominion, DERs are often treated as an existential threat to their bottom line, despite the wide array of benefits that they offer to the grid and society as a whole. But Dominion won't admit that this is the real reason they're attacking net metering. Instead, they're going to frame it as a question of customer fairness and energy affordability. But if they truly cared about those things, why would they be doubling down on the main drivers of high energy costs, like excessive rate hikes, increased profit margins, and expensive, polluting natural gas plants? We have some stats up there for you to see that Dominion raked in $1.5 billion in profits just through June of this year. And they're still trying to increase their profit level from 9.7% to 10.4%, while seeking a $1.9 billion rate increase over the next 2 years that will increase their customers' bills by upwards of $20 a month. And since 2007, the rate of their energy bill rate hikes has been higher than the actual rate of inflation. And they're also pushing for a new 1,000 megawatt gas-fired power plant in Chesterfield County and fail to consider any alternative generation sources that could be cleaner and more affordable for ratepayers. So ultimately, we believe that their attack has all to do about greed, not affordability and not fairness. So I'm going to pass it on to Brandon to talk more about the nature of their attack and what's at stake if they win.
Thank you, Selah, for really giving a good expose into Dominion and kind of their current situation, especially with rising utility costs and data centers popping up. So thank you for that good overview. Lee, if you can move to the next slide. And I want to thank Bob Shippey. I saw Bob Shippey on tonight, and thank you for your comment that kind of debunks this subsidizing of non-solar customers or this cost shifting argument. I appreciate you for that, Bob. So Dominion's attempt to dismantle net metering. So here are some highlights of what Dominion's proposal is. So Dominion on the first step is trying to shortchange net metered customers. So as I talked about in the breakdown of net metering, current law calls for a one-to-one retail credits, a one-to-one credit. So the retail rate right now is 14 cents a kilowatt hour. At current rate, you get a one-to-one credit. Dominion is proposing to decrease that retail rate by 32% to about 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour. What this will do is it would mean that you would need to add or to install a bigger system in order to match that equal energy production to kind of try to offset more of your energy production. It would also have a drastic effect on rates of return. The rate of return on a solar investment right now, on a solar system right now, the average size being about 6 to 8 kilowatts, is about 9 to 11 years. This would take that 9 to 11 year range and turn it into almost 30 years on a return of investment if they were to succeed with reducing this retail rate. If the return on investment is longer and there's not as much customer incentive on decreasing their energy bills, then what we'll also see is we'll see more jobs in the solar market would begin to dry up. Residential installation makes up a brunt of Virginia's deployment, and so that would have a drastic impact on a lot of economic drivers, not only for installers, but also for localities who are depending on permitting and things of that nature as systems are being deployed. The second piece that Dominion is trying to do in their proposal is to shrink the netting period from 12 months to 30 minutes. So in the current makeup of net metering, as I said, you net over a 12-month period. So as you produce energy, you get that one-to-one credit for all of that energy that you produce over a 12-month period. At current, that is the policy. Dominion is trying to shrink that 12-month period to a 30-minute window. And if this is accepted, it limits customers' freedom. It deprives all Virginians of crucial energy and bill savings, which I talked about. And then this last piece of the shrinking of the netting period would narrow opportunities to maintain grid reliability and lower peak demand, because Dominion has the opportunity, as we send energy to the grid, it helps the grid, it helps with the load, and it also helps Dominion to be able to regulate some of that energy as they would need. If the netting period is shorter, there's going to be less energy being fed back to the grid, making our grid less reliable, and definitely making it less reliable in times where we are seeing a huge increase in our energy consumption here in the state of Virginia. Let's move on to the next slide, Leah. And I'm going to turn it over here to Ashish Kapoor from Piedmont Environmental Council. He's going to talk a little bit about a study that they had produced that talks about the value of solar.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon and Selah. I think y'all did a great job kind of laying out what the issues are. I'm really excited to be partnering with you guys, not just tonight and on the webinars, but we're also partnering with Solar United Neighbors as interveners in the case in the SCC, along with Sierra Club and Vote Solar, that will address this issue in the State Corporation Commission. I just wanted to kind of add further clarity on one point that's come up in the Q&A here in the chat. Data centers are really increasing the load, by about double over the next 15 years. So the reason that affects the ratepayer is all that excess generation that we need to provide, energy for those data centers, all those new transmission lines to get power to those data centers. That's all paid for by the ratepayer, by you and I. So that's why we're seeing those, projected doubling and more of utility bills over the next 10, 15 years. And so that's why it's that much more imperative that we have a robust policy that continues to encourage distributed solar and rooftop solar. And it is really the quickest way to add energy of any sort, and clean energy in this case, to the grid. So it's that much more crucial, especially when Virginia is now importing more energy than any other state in America. So of all times, it's actually more critical than ever for us to maintain net metering standards as they are now. So to that end, we commissioned a value of solar report with Dunsky Energy and Climate Advisors. The purpose of this report is twofold. One, to kind of lay out what is the real value of distributed solar. What are all the aspects and benefits of this form of generation that Dominion is not looking at in their petition to the SCC to cut the net metering rate. So we looked at a host of different factors, which I'll briefly go over, and then I'll just share this report link in the chat for folks that want to do a deeper dive. And the second purpose of the report is to really educate folks, lawmakers, citizens, For the net metering case, that means getting enough information so when you engage in public comment with the SCC, which is now open, and y'all are able to do that and let them know how you feel, and then also kind of register to do any public testimony in the middle of January. You'll be informed through these webinars and hopefully through this report as well. And then secondly, just as a foundation for general distributed generation policy in the Commonwealth, so rooftop solar, parking lot solar, even dual use like agrivoltaics, where you have agricultural production and solar production on the same space. So we commissioned Dunsky Energy and Climate Advisors to calculate the actual value of distributed generation for Virginia, and found that small scale distributed solar delivers sustainable value that far exceeds what's currently under this net billing framework that Dominion has petitioned. So keeping that fair and keeping it as it is now can really help in all those ways to meet that escalating demand, and then also insulate ratepayers from those increasing utility bills. So next slide, please. And then this is just a high level look at what we looked at with this report. So it was really a two-pronged approach. One, what are the utility benefits? So how much less generation would the utility have to build? How many less gas plants, et cetera, would they have to build? How many less transmission lines would they have to build? As we discussed, we all pay for that. How many less distribution lines would they have to build? And then, why is the utility not looking at that as a benefit of distributed solar? And then the second leg of it is the Commonwealth benefits. So, pollution reduction, economic benefits, as was pointed out. These types of systems employ a lot more people locally in Virginia, and land use impacts. So the more we kind of create solar on the built environment, whether it's rooftops or parking lots or whatever, brownfields, that's that much less impact on forested lands and prime ag lands and natural resource impacts. So, what is the value of all of that Dominion is not looking at? And what we found is on the utility benefit side, and this is mainly saving cost on energy generation, Dunsky arrived at about 16 cents per kilowatt hour. So that in of itself, you can see in the chart on the right, that's the more solid colors. That in of itself is already higher than the current net metering rate of 14 cents a kilowatt hour. Then there was an additional 24-cent per kilowatt hour benefit of those Commonwealth benefits, pollution reduction, local economic benefits, land use impacts, et cetera. All combined equals 40 cents. And you can see that is where it goes up to in that sort of more opaque line. And then that goes down a little bit over time as there's more penetration from distributed solar, then the value of it tends to decrease a little bit over time. And then lastly, when you add storage to the mix, that increases the value even further. You're getting the benefit of energy resilience, and you're also getting a concept that maybe we'll talk about a little bit later in the Q&A is virtual power plants. So the utility can incentivize everybody's backup battery that's connected to their solar, and they pull a little bit from every battery, and we really aggregate that. You can do what that expensive new gas plant would do, and then we all get the benefits, and it's a lot cheaper, and it's been very successful in places like Texas where it's saved hundreds of millions of dollars and kept the lights on during grid emergency events. And then the sort of qualitative benefits, hard to measure and put actual financial value to, but energy security, resilience, independence, protecting yourself. If the grid goes out, you can run your, essential functions in your home. You can run your cooler, with your medicine. You can run your CPAP machine or, whatever it is. What's the value of that? I mean, maybe that's hard to really quantify, but that's important. Decarbonization benefits, and then asset value enhancement. So, studies show that the value of your home goes up when you have rooftop solar on there. That's a value for you and I. The utility may not see it as a value through their profit lens, but that's another qualitative benefit. So I'll go ahead and share that link in the chat for folks that want to do a deeper dive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Leah, you can go on to the next slide. And I want to say, Ashish, I believe that Selah has already shared in the chat the link for PEC's full report
Okay,
as well.
great. Thank you.
All right. So now I want to talk a little bit about what you can do and how our solar advocates responding to this proposal. So as we did in the APCO net metering case, Sun is also intervening in this SEC docket. We are intervening with a very similar intervention group, Vote Solar Sierra Club. And thank you, Bob Shippey, for being on tonight. And with Piedmont Environmental Council, whom Ashish represents here on this evening. There are other intervening parties, Appalachian Voices, Distributed Solar Alliance, and Advanced Energy United are also interveners in this docket case as well. So there's a good coalition of folks from the solar space who are intervening in this current docket. Our expert testimony will break down how Dominion understates the few components that it's considered in its value of solar to the grid and some other societal impacts, and how it completely disregards many others, like it avoids air pollution, load flexibility, avoided risk premiums from natural gas price volatility, and the such. We will also highlight how net metering helps maximize the value and success of Dominion's upcoming virtual power plant program, which was recently signed into law in May. And we thank Ashish for giving an overview of the Dunsky report, and we'll also be referencing some key alignments with those findings, as well as using some of the order from APCO that the SCC spoke about as it relates to net metering and the 12-month netting period, which they see as crucial to state interpretation of current code. So we're going to be looking at a few different things in our testimony. We feel really good about going into this case, and we're hoping for a very good outcome. But that takes me to the next slide, Leah, which is that, and Selah, I don't know if this is you.
Yeah, I
You
got
want to jump in? Yeah, okay, good. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good transition. And we're running a little ahead of time, so this is good. We'll have plenty of time for questions. I know there have been a bunch in the chat, so we appreciate y'all's patience. But yeah, we want to talk a little bit about how you can support our fight. Because I just want to emphasize that, as good as our intervention is, like, we are not going to get the outcome we want without a lot of public support. We really need you all if we have any chance of beating Dominion's attempt to weaken this program. We want to convince the SEC that their neighbors, their friends, their family, and everyone here in this call and all their other community members collectively reject Dominion's greedy proposal. And so, yeah, the more public comments we get, the better. But we really also need comments that are unique and personal. And I have testimonies about how this change would affect you. And again, even if you don't have solar, a more expensive and unreliable grid is a huge threat to your well-being. And so I want to talk about a couple of ways that you can take action. One thing you'll notice is that there's a QR code on this slide. It'll also be on the next slide, and that's to our action alert, and that'll help you submit a written comment to the SCC. We also link to the actual web form there if you want to just skip our action alert, but we encourage you using our action alert because in there is the actual template that we've written out that you can just send out yourself. But again, we really would prefer if you add a line or two or even more about how this affects you personally, because that's more likely to move the SEC. And the deadline to submit this is by January 13th. So you have a lot of time to think about what you want to add in there. And to also share this with friends, family, neighbors, and anyone else, both, again, solar owners and just customers of Dominion. You can also register to be called on the day on the phone on the day of the public hearing so that you can deliver your testimony over the phone. For that, you also have to register by January 13th by sharing your name and phone number on the form linked on the screen or by calling the number that's also on that screen. And again, we'll share this information after today's webinar. Traditionally, public testimony has been allowed in person, but this changed after the COVID pandemic in 2020. So now it's up to the discretion of the hearing examiner for the case or the SEC commissioners themselves. We can still attend the hearing, but whether or not they'll let you actually go up on the podium and deliver your testimony is something that we can't actually promise. But what we can promise is that if you register to testify, you will get called. And so you might be in the actual room and they'll call you on the phone, and it'll be a little bit awkward, I guess, to do it that way, but still you will be heard. And the last thing is that we ask you to join our mailing list so we can keep you updated about some of the other ways to join this fight. We're tentatively planning a comment writing workshop and even maybe a rally this winter too. So we'd love to see you out there for those two events too. And Leah, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. This is on our action alert. I just wanted to give you like a preview of the talking points on there that can guide you as you're making, again, a more customized personal um, comment. And we just really wanted to frame it as things that I guess are at risk that we could lose if Dominion's proposal is accepted. So as you see here, we talk about energy freedom and guaranteed savings, again, not just for solar owners, for everybody who's a Dominion customer. And we also show how net metering is really important to maintaining a resilient and building, not just maintaining a resilient, reliable, and affordable grid. And again, that last point talks about some of the local economic opportunities when it comes to job growth and tax revenue. And so this is just a start. There's a lot more to talk about if you want. And yeah, we want to now transition to questions. If you go to the next slide, also, Leah, thank you so much. And please be patient with us. If there's any questions we can't answer today, we'll definitely follow up with you as we have a huge team of experts on solar. And so feel free to ask whatever you want. I know there's a bunch in the chat too. Yeah, I'm trying to think what would be the best way to start. I see there's one question in the Q&A that we haven't yet answered from Bill. Should we just start from there and then work our way through the
Yeah,
one?
let's start from there. And I'm also scrolling the chat. I've been trying to answer back to some, but I think I've missed a few. So let's start with the Q&A with Bill's question, and then we'll run into the chat.
We can like run down the panelists. Like I'm happy to give a first answer, and then yeah, Brandon and Ashish, if you feel like there's more to add, please feel free to start. So yeah, Bill had a question that basically asked. He said his comments are focused on fixed cost recovery methods, urging the SEC to look more broadly at the basic customer charge rather than penalizing solar customers. Makes a great comparison that penalizing solar customers that use less energy because they install solar would be like penalizing energy efficiency program participants who also use less energy. And so he's wondering if Sun is addressing this core issue with the SEC. And this gets at the cost shift argument that we kind of were talking about earlier, although we didn't explicitly name it. And yeah, in our testimony, we don't make that one-to-one comparison like you did. So I think that is a good, unique value that you've brought to your comments. But we do talk about the unfairness of having this discriminatory and unrealistic attack on solar. And again, the ways that diminishing and disregarding all the values to the grid that aren't even fully captured, which is what Ashish's report shows, like how much value solar still brings to the grid that isn't even captured in the one-to-one retail rate, to help debunk that myth that solar customers are subsidizing non-solar customers, and so are being subsidized by non-solar customers. Apologies. And so, yeah, I think that's a great thing. I think that's a great point to raise up. But again, we don't explicitly mention energy efficiency, but definitely agree with that logic and encourage you and others to continue highlighting those points in your comments. Ashish and Brandon, do you want to add anything before we go to the next question?
No, I think that was perfect.
Okay.
I would concur with him. And I have another question. This was one that was in the chat, but they also dropped it in the Q&A as well. I was coming to this one as well. If this goes through, or considering talking about Dominion's proposal, are only current rooftop solar customers screwed, or would all Dominion customers' bills go up?
So yeah, we started to answer this in the chat, and the reason that we said that it's actually everybody's bills is this is when Ashish talked about this, and I kind of talked about this, and actually we all talked about this to varying degrees. Is because net energy metering, solar, and other similar forms of distributed energy resources, including energy efficiency, like Bill pointed out, they all reduce peak demand. And so they reduce the need for these utility companies to actually build as much large-scale centralized infrastructure, generation infrastructure, distribution infrastructure, as well as transmission infrastructure, which is really expensive. And so when you reduce the need to build that out, it actually lowers system costs for everybody. And so that's savings in the pocket of every Virginian, regardless of if they have solar or not. But again, that's also missed out profits for Dominion. Again, profits that they're trying to make at 10.4% of what they're investing into this infrastructure. And so that's why they're pushing so hard against it, even though it makes sense for the rest of us. Yeah, that's my initial thought on it. I don't know if the other parents want to add more.
No, I'm fine. I think you covered that well. Now I see that you're typing an answer to Scott's question. Did you want to finish typing that, or did you just want to answer it live?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Scott, was this for the shared solar one? Because if so, that was fixed and that it should not be present for this new action alert. But if it was for this action alert, that's news to me and I will like work on that out offline. But just wanted to make sure. If you can respond in the chat, that would be helpful for me. But thank you for asking that and just making sure.
Now, I'm coming to the chat. I know some of you have submitted some questions in the chat, and I'm coming to that. We just have a couple more questions that are in our queue, in our Q&A thread. From Robert Spiller: to get electric utilities to make giant users such as a data company to pay for the capital costs incurred by their giant loads, do we need statutory changes, or can the SEC force the utilities to change their allocation of cost algorithm?
Do y'all want me to take a first pass or does someone else? I'm happy to, but I also wanted to give y'all an opportunity to take a first pass if you want.
I'll let you or Ashish take a first pass at that.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So either approach can be done. Throughout the country, there have been like I know Georgia and even Maryland have passed laws to try and put data centers in their own customer class, so that they need to pay more of their fair share of those capital costs. But in other parts of the country, I think they've pursued it in a regulatory way, like in Indiana, I think they did, and they actually got an interesting settlement that is requiring the data centers to cover some of the costs for some, I don't know if it's just energy efficiency, but some solar storage and energy efficiency potentially. Don't quote me exactly on that, but for those type of resources for customers broadly is what I will say. And so either of those approaches can be taken, and that's something that we're figuring out our exact line on, but in general, definitely encourage, just again, given the subsidization that a lot of other customers are actually paying to data centers, if we want to talk about a real cost shift. But Ashish, do you want to add some more?
Yeah, and I think that's right, and we are seeing it in other parts of the country where there is this process going on. How do we ring fence, the new generation demands and transmission demands that are coming about from this new load, like we mentioned, mostly from data centers. And then the other leg of it is, sustainability, right? So you're giving these data centers all of these tax breaks and these incentives to do business in your locality, but what's being demanded of them? In the same way that, your own rooftop solar may do it, you're doing your part in reducing that, demand and that peak load, as Selah pointed out. There can be numerous things that a data center can do to decrease that load, shift when they do, processes or have some level of on-site generation, use some sort of energy efficiency standards, whether it's through cooling mechanisms, or otherwise, on-site batteries. Those sorts of things can all be, effective at decreasing that load and are part and parcel of a distributed system in that regard. So that's just another thing that would have to happen legislatively to tie those incentives and those tax incentives to some sort of sustainability mechanism.
Thank
Thank
you.
you both for that. And I think someone else had asked a question about statutory changes. I say when I talked about the regulatory route, there are statutory routes that could be taken, but those can be a little harder to take. And so as we approach the election and then the upcoming legislative session, we'll see what measures are put forth to try to deal with our data center issue. There are several environmental groups in the state who are very committed to different portions of data center legislation that would attempt to have them to either pay their fair share or socialize that cost in a much different way. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that as we move into the legislative session upcoming in January. I'm coming around to the chat. There's still a couple of questions in our Q&A thread. And this is from Perry. So now that they're trying to get rid of the net metering program, would it be wise to move forward with getting a battery backup before the end of the year, if that is when the tax credit will end? For the purposes of the tax credit, I would definitely say yes. If you want to take advantage of the tax credit by the end of the year, it would definitely be wise to look into battery backup. Um, as it relates to getting rid of to reducing the net metering program, would adding battery backup affect that? My initial answer, Ashish and Selah, is that no, that would not affect that at all. If I'm not mistaken with that. Okay, seeing no objections there.
You're good.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. All right, that's what I just wanted to make sure. But I would say if you would like to take advantage of the tax credit, Perry, that would definitely be something that you would want to invest in by the end of this year. Another question in the Q&A chat from Scott. Virginia is different though, since we have such a giant amount of data centers compared to other states. We should not have to shoulder that burden. Data centers cost us all money. We need to find a way to educate people against the myth they lower costs. I would agree. And I think someone answered, Bob answered in the chat kind of some of the other ancillary services that are used, like water to cool a lot of these to cool a lot of these engines, and the addition of power lines to be able to funnel power to these centers too. So you are correct. There are a lot of different costs. And when it comes to transmission build out, that is something that the utility does recoup costs on. So yes, there are definitely some other mechanisms other than rising utility costs or load growth rather, that factor into data centers. And Ashish and Selah, feel free to chime in if I left anything.
I don't have anything to add to that. I know we've been talking a lot of data center stuff, so thank you for hammering
And
it.
so going back through the comments here, there are a couple of questions that we haven't answered. Give me one second. I'm scrolling, y'all. Y'all give me 1 second here. Someone asked, and I think Michael asked, I think Bill Prindle kind of answered it. Can our state senators and delegates lobby the SEC? The SEC is an independent agency, though they are appointed by the state legislature. They are an independent agency. So once they have been confirmed, there's no real lobbying. But as Selah talked about, your voice is going to be the biggest difference maker, as well as intervention into this docket case. So we encourage you all to either make public comment, to submit public comment, or to sign up for in-public testimony.
And I can answer a quick question on co-ops I'm seeing in there. I see Joshua asked a question in the chat. Also, folks, if you put a question earlier, we're scanning through, but if you don't mind and you feel comfortable, if you can copy it to the Q&A, it'll be much easier for us to track it there. But we are going to go through the chat in the next 14 minutes. I see a question from Joshua. If Dominion's proposal is accepted, would it apply only to Dominion customers, or would it apply to all Virginians who might be under other utilities like Novec or RAP Co-op? It would only apply to Dominion's customers. And so like APCO customers would be under a different tariff, as well as co-op customers. That's how I understand it. If anyone else feels otherwise, though, please please let me know.
That's right. And I just on the previous comment on the comments, from what I understand, I think the more particular and specific your comment is, whether it's testimony or comment, it's about your story, rather than something boilerplate, the more effective it will be. And the more of those types of stories they get that come through the lens of citizens and whatever concerns you want to integrate. Maybe it's data centers, maybe it's energy independence, maybe it's, just saving that money. And someone asked in the chat, I think that's a good idea, having some sort of calculator where we can see, how much would my bill at the current rates, going up, 14, 15% a year. And as they continue to go up, if you were to get solar now over the course of 15, 20 years, what would your savings be? And that's an extra good, very personal factoid to drop in a public comment. You doing this would prevent me from saving $110,000, just making up a number, over 20 years. And electricity bills are my largest expense, or something like that. Those comments can be really compelling for the staff.
And so while you continue to scroll, we got some other questions that have jumped into the Q&A chat. This is from Philip. High battery backup does battery backup make a system more efficient? I paid X amount for my solar. Shouldn't they be paying me more? Anybody want to take a stab at this? I mean, I don't know if I'm not an engineer, so I wouldn't say if it makes the system more efficient. But what I would say is the passing of the virtual power plant pilot program will offer a way for you to monetize that battery. That official docket case opens up on December the 1st, with that program hopefully opening up sometime in next summer. Someone else actually asked about, is there a way to sign up for the VPP program? Not as of yet, because that still has to go through an SEC regulatory process as well to determine what the program design looks like, as well as what the tariff will be. So earliest I'm expecting maybe next summer. Hopefully that program will be open, and Sun will be doing a series of educational pieces around that, and hopefully assisting consumers to register and sign up for that program as well.
Brandon, can I respond to one of the ones in the chat real quick?
Yes.
I'm gonna take two. This is Kristen and Julie. For Kristen, you asked if we could create social media images for us to share on Facebook and Instagram.
I think
Thank
I
you.
answered that one.
Oh, you did? I missed that?
Yeah, I typed it in the chat. Yes, we do
Okay.
have a,
My
yeah.
bad. Okay, perfect. Did we answer the actual date of the hearing? Yes, we did. My bad. That's all you. Thank you. You moving on to the ones in the Q&A? I needed to scroll a little further.
Just a comment from Robert here that was put in there that talks about rural cooperative customers, and how they get their electricity downstream from places like Dominion. So they have a vested interest in how this rate case unfolds. Thank you for that, Robert. Marty Newhouse, good to see you on tonight, Marty. Any thoughts on what rationale for opposition to this would be most compelling to the SEC? Sounds like it's best to personalize our individual situation. That is correct. But beyond that, do you have any guidance? I'm also wondering if comments would be more influential coming from prospective rooftop solar consumers / homeowners as opposed to existing rooftop solar owners. I'll definitely say that I think if you have potential prospective rooftop solar owners, yes, that would definitely, that would definitely be good comments. They can share how net metering would allow them to offset their energy costs. But I think hearing from current existing rooftop solar owners is just as important. Being able to testify to how net metering has saved you money, and that taking this away would rob others of that opportunity to do the same. Rational opposition. Ashish, Selah, give you all a chance to kind of speak on that too. Any thoughts on what rational opposition for this would be, this would be most compelling to the SEC?
Sorry, I'm trying to read that question.
Oop. And I just unalived it. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Can I answer the question? I got you.
So sorry, was the question related to what the best argument for the public commenter is?
Yeah, that's, as I'm presuming, that was how it was framed.
Do you want to go first? I think you did just also speak to this pretty well, Brandon, but if Ashish wants to go, and I can add.
Yeah, to me, I think ratepayer impact is a great way to frame it. I mean, I see a comment in here from Elizabeth Frazee. I put in rooftop solar as part of my retirement plan. Once I'm on Social Security, I can't afford these constantly escalating bills. And those types of things are great stories because, when you really do aggregate what you pay to a utility over time, it's a lot. And we're locked in these contracts with utilities. Imagine if a utility, had you, like solar is, where you pay for it or finance it. Imagine if a utility had you pay for 20 years worth of energy. You can imagine how large that number would be. So it is a huge cost. And if you're on fixed income or whatever it may be, when that bill's escalating, I mean, that can have a tremendous impact. And solar gives you the ability to lock in, so you know create less variability in cost, which is the goal for all of us, but particularly if you're on a fixed income. So to me, I think those are really compelling arguments. And then, for rural users or people that are end of line or have, sort of like health issues or things like that, I have solar with battery and it gives me this energy resilience and, telling that whole story can also be really compelling, I think.
Thank you, Ashish. That's a great breakdown. I think the last thing I would add, which I think Brandon also emphasized, is if anyone's on this call and doesn't have solar and can't access it for any reason, but is obviously still interested in this and understands the way that it impacts them and their energy bills, I think just speaking to that would be really helpful so that they don't think that it's just the solar industry and solar customers who care about this. Like it is everybody. It affects everybody. And ultimately, we want as many people to get access to solar, but we also recognize that this is a full-scale attack on all of our collective energy rights. And I think framing it as such will be really powerful and moving, especially in this moment where we just have such a affordability crisis like across industries for housing, healthcare, what have you. And so I think it's just really important to hammer that home for the SEC. And I think again, really push any friends, family, neighbors, et cetera, if they might think this has nothing to do with them. And I think we've armed you all hopefully with the information and the tools to know that it does. And if you need more of that information, we're always happy to help.
Yeah, and if I could just tack on here too, um, I think looking at what Selah spoke about earlier, as we couple in the load growth and the fact that solar does add to the grid and helps with that peak load. If the full retail value of net metering is no longer beneficial for folks to add solar, that's less deployable assets going to the grid. And in that case, it would then circle back to what Selah talked about earlier, which is that the utility would have to figure out some way to build out infrastructure to be able to meet our current state's energy load. So that could either look like more gas peaker power plants, or that could be purchasing energy off the PJM regional market, which just had a 1,000% increase back in July. So we all, in some way, are literally held hostage in rates in our energy costs when distributed energy resources like solar cannot be deployed in a fair, equitable way. So I just wanted to highlight that and put that back up there as well.
Can I also add, for in terms of what makes effective public comment, I think also if you're motivated by, natural resource preservation, I mean, I think that's also really compelling. The more that we build solar on the built environment, that's better for our water quality. That means less land lost, less farmland lost, less forested land lost, and everything that comes with that. Maybe you're motivated by wildlife, maybe it's water quality, maybe it's air quality. All of that stuff is really, I think, compelling from a Commonwealth perspective. If you're a farmer, solar development may be, feeling like an existential threat. Well, this is a way to advocate for a solution and having more robust distributed generation policy, and then certainly part of that foundational distributed solar policy is net metering. So there's a lot of different angles to hit this with, and telling your personal story, I think is the most important thing.
And I want to just thank Elizabeth Frazee for another comment that she left in the chat as well, saying that these changes from Dominion feel like they want to steal power from those of us who have gone through all the time and expense of adding rooftop solar. And if they were to be successful in changing the netting period, that is exactly what they would be. That is exactly what they would be doing. So thank you for adding that as well. I think that's a very interesting perspective to look at this through as well. I think I've gone through all of the questions in the chat. We don't have any others in the Q&A, but I'll just pause for just another second in case any of you all have any other questions that you'd like to ask the panelists. And I want to thank Ashish Kapoor for being with us tonight from Piedmont Environmental Council. He's a very, very reliable partner of Sun, but also a powerhouse in his own right as PEC fights for in environmental justice and fair environmental policies here in the state of Virginia. Also want to thank Leah Farrell for being on with us on this evening and being our slideshow navigator for us on this evening. And thank her as well. And then also Selah, our Atlantic Southeast policy person who has been engaging very, very heavily in this fight. I want to thank him for his participation as well. If you could go to the next slide, Leah, I think there's a closing slide here. And just to wrap up again, for those of you who were joining us on this evening, this webinar is being recorded and a link to it will be shared will be shared with everyone who did register for this webinar. If you have any additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to us at vateam@soulunitedneighbors.org, and one of our state team members will be glad to reach back out to you and answer any net metering related questions or docket case related questions that you may have. Thank you, Selah, for dropping that in the chat. Again, thank you all again for joining us for this webinar on this evening. We hope that this information was helpful, and we encourage you to submit comments. We had about 100 people on this evening, and over 300 folks registered for this webinar. So if everybody submits a comment, we're already 300 comments deep. So thank you all again for your participation and for your support as we fight for an equitable energy system. And we hope that you all have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.